Hi there. Welcome to the Johnny Jenkins Show this afternoon, Friday the 10th of April. It's 3 o'clock. Thank you for your company this afternoon. Now, the Johnny Jenkins Show, as you know, normally takes place on Raw 12:51 a.m., Warwick's award-winning student radio station at 3 o'clock on a Friday, but due to the current times, we are on Facebook for the foreseeable future. And thank you for your company this afternoon, and I'd like you all to get in touch if you've got any thoughts. We can have an expert panel talking about the top issues of the week. If you've got something you want to say, if you've got an opinion that you want to be heard, then you can get in touch with your comments today. Just comment down below and we'll put them up on screen a little bit like this. If you're watching where someone shared it or you're on a page, just make sure you're on the original Johnny Jenkins page when you're putting your comment down, and then I can share it up on the screen a little bit like that. It's time now to welcome our panel today on the Johnny Jenkins Show. We'll bring them in one by one, have a little bit of a chat with them, meet them if you haven't met them already. We'll start by welcoming Noah. Good afternoon, Noah.
Good afternoon, Johnny. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, coping with these coronavirus times, but just trying to keep myself busy.
It's difficult, isn't it? I suppose just to keep yourself sane at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't mind my own company too much, so I suppose I'm finding it easier than other people, but just being in the same environment 24/7, apart from a 1-hour walk, it's definitely very strange. I think that's the right adjective.
Now, Noah, if people haven't met you before, what should they know about you? What do you do at Warwick? How do you keep yourself busy?
Well, I'm a first-year politics student, so it's strange having the third term of my first year cancelled. I like to try and keep busy. I write for the Board newspaper, the rival to Raw. I've been a guest on the Raw radio station a few times. I've written for Perspectives as well, which you might know about. And I'm also an event steward at Warwick Arts Centre, which is going through big renovations at the moment.
We're not rivals, we're friends, Noah. Where are you in the world at the moment? Where are you?
I'm in Cambridge.
Okay, no, it's great to have you on the show. We will welcome now our next panelist, Arthur Varr. Welcome, how are you?
I'm surviving. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you keeping yourself busy?
Mostly a lot of sleep. I am definitely catching up on the damage done by week 10. But yeah, apart from that, just spending time with my family.
And if people haven't met you before, what should they know about you?
Well, I'm a first-year computer systems engineering student. Apart from that, not much. I kind of keep to myself. Don't get out much. Yeah, you know.
And where are you in the world at the moment?
Computer science and engineering is you're kind of being hammered on both sides.
Yeah, it sounds quite difficult. I'd never heard of this degree before.
Yeah, so it's like 50-50 computer science and electrical engineering. So that's fun.
That's quite something. And where are you in the world at the moment?
I am currently in Dubai. I live here. So yeah. Fantastic. I managed to flee the country before the travel ban. So.
Yeah, it was difficult, isn't it? Because we also went away over Easter, not knowing when we're going to go back. Let's welcome now our next panelist today, Misha. Misha, you haven't been on the show before, have you? How are you?
No, I've been good. I've been on Inside a couple of times at Raw, and I have my radio show there. But this is the first time on your show. Pleasure to be here myself.
Thank you. It's great to have you. Now, what have you been up to this week?
Oh, I've got the fun task of writing a dissertation whilst I'm in my exile and quarantine, which is nice. I'm kind of missing the access to things like the library and just different resources to what I can find online. But generally, I've got enough essay work or my own writing projects to be keeping up with. You know, trying to keep optimistic, trying to keep busy.
What's your dissertation about?
It's on theatre in relation to the AIDS crisis and how plays focusing on such a theme that is so relevant to a cultural identity at the time, 30 years later or even 40 years later, has taken on new meaning and new interpretation, and how that changes the relationship between audience and show.
Fascinating. Well, if people haven't met you before, they've heard you host a show on Raw, but what else should they know about you?
So I'm a third-year theatre and performance student, which it means it's my job to pretty much study everything and then try and be pretentious about how it can be linked to art and culture. Aside from that, I've been on a variety of different execs at work. I've been, for example, Wits, Salsa, Shake Sock, Fashion. I'm a deputy editor at The Boar and regular writer for the film, art, and news section. And I am currently, to answer one of your other questions, in London at the moment, which is lovely. It's very sunny here down as well, but yeah, just missing the rest of the company that work can provide.
Yeah, well, you sound like you keep yourself busy, Misha. Great to have you on the show today. And
Nice to be here.
welcome now in Neeraj. Neeraj, good afternoon.
Hi, Johnny.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
Good. And Neeraj, what have you been up to since being in isolation?
So yeah, I've basically been like cracking on with coursework, some sort of some exam revision as well, and kind of in between just going outside, getting fresh air as well.
It's difficult with the exams, isn't it? Because I mean, I certainly hadn't had enough clarity on how they're going to happen. Do you know how your exams are going to take place?
So I know that it's going to be they're going to be open book exams. They're going to be the same amount of time plus the 45 minutes to upload and kind of get set up. And also I know that we've got a safety net as well. So I'm not sure if that's the same. I think that's university-wide safety net. But it's just a question of how it's going to work and whether it's going to work for the coursework as well. But it's good they've introduced that.
Yeah, and it's something we were talking about in the show last week, because they've put this policy in where essentially they make some sort of average, and that's what we need some sort of clarity on how that's going to work. But they make an average and they say that you can't do worse than what you've already achieved, really. And Neeraj, where are you in the world at the moment?
So I'm in Norwich, so that's kind of Eastern England, in case you don't know.
It's a lovely place.
So Norfolk, yeah. So
great. Well, thank you for being here. We'll welcome in now final panelist who I think the best way to introduce him is that he's been on the show more than I have. Enoch, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Johnny. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What have you been up to?
Oh, well, you know, Raw News is always active. We just launched our own YouTube page and posted our first YouTube video. Our coverage of the Women's March that took place in week 10. So if anyone wants to go check that out, it's all been shared on Facebook and Twitter. So, you know.
Because you're the head of news at Raw, aren't you?
I am the head of news at Raw. That is, I'm Johnny's boss technically, actually, I think, in terms of how that works.
I think so. I'll be on my best behaviour. Now, Enoch, what have you been up to?
I mean, honestly, just working on... We have so many good projects going on Raw News starting next term. So I've just been working on getting all those up and running. We have a website coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. We have an Instagram now, so, you know, all sorts of stuff.
Do the promo for us. Where can people follow it?
It's at Raw1251 News on Instagram, Raw News on YouTube, Raw News Warwick at Twitter. Go follow everything.
Fantastic. Well, and finally, Enoch, where are you in the world?
I'm in London. I'm in the sunny.
Nice.
Why is it suddenly the one time I can't leave the house? That's the question I'm asking myself.
It's so beautiful outside. It's lovely, isn't it?
It's amazing. And every time I look out, I'm like, I can't go out there because it's just filled disease ridden. It's a nightmare.
Especially London being the hotspot.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. And what we're going to do on the show this afternoon is get into some panel discussion. I want to know your thoughts as well. So if you're watching on Facebook and you're watching live, then you can get in touch with your comments this afternoon. Just make sure you're commenting on the Johnny Jenkins page and not on a group or some share, because I won't see that otherwise. Then I can't put it up on the screen there. Now, of course, coronavirus is sweeping the globe, and it's something that's having an effect on all of our lives, as we've just been talking about there. But this big story this week has been the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, being in intensive care, leaving intensive care last night. He seemed to be improving. He's, of course, got the virus, and a lot of people are saying, actually, we shouldn't be talking about the Prime Minister herself. We should be talking about the thousands that are dying. 886 people we heard that have died in England in the last 24 hours. Noah, I'll come to you first on this. What do you think of all this commentary about the Prime Minister's health and the discussions around that? Do you think it's worth the airtime it's getting?
I think it is definitely worth the airtime it's getting. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. We can look at the Prime Minister's health and how he has clearly been suffering by being in intensive care, but also look at the many hundreds and thousands of people that have died in the UK and around the world. And I think it's really important to consider both, especially in the UK, looking at the death rate and how it's increasing, how the number of people actually catching coronavirus is also increasing, and trying to see when the UK will reach the peak number of cases before we see a decline, because it's only when we reach the peak that we'll eventually be able to get out of lockdown. But as for the Prime Minister, I think it is right to look at his health specifically. He is the head of the UK. He is the one that should have been leading our response. Obviously, he can't do that at the moment. So I don't think it's wrong to look at the Prime Minister's health specifically.
It is worrying, isn't it? That I suppose it shows us that anyone can get it, doesn't it, Noah?
Yeah, it really does. It doesn't distinguish between people. There was an interesting clip from Emily Maitlis, who hosts Newsnight, who said while it doesn't distinguish between people, the effect of coronavirus in this lockdown is very different on individuals, depending on whether you're someone that can work from home and conduct meetings online, or whether you're someone like a cleaner who simply has to go in to work to clean and try and save our lives. So while anyone can catch the virus, the way that this pandemic, it does distinguish between people based on your level of wealth and whether you can work from home. So I think we've really shone a light on that. And if one good thing can come out of this pandemic, it might be that there is some form of change to try and, make things fairer, really.
We certainly are all learning new ways to do things. And I mean, I've never done the show on Facebook Live before, but here we are. Misha, thank you for being on the show today. What do you think about these discussions about the Prime Minister's health? Do you think we should be having these discussions?
Look, I have every sympathy for Boris Johnson, and as I hope for every single person who currently has this virus, I hope he recovers and I hope that he's able to be okay. But the fact is, whilst we are obviously going to talk about it because it's a politically important issue, especially as it does look at the circumstances surrounding a major political figure being incapacitated by the virus, the fact is, we know that his situation for coronavirus is not going to be the same as everyone else. He's going to receive some of the best treatment that you can get, be placed in like hospitals that don't have to worry about the funding. Like, he's not at the same level of risk that so many thousands of people all around the country currently are. So I don't know if as much emphasis should be placed on it. And obviously it's important to keep track of the circumstances because it does have consequences for the rest of the country. But ultimately, I don't know if we should be establishing this cult of personality about him becoming this martyr-like figure as someone who had to undergo this great ordeal, which, whilst true, is really missing out some of the important distinctive context.
Well, he's in St Thomas's Hospital, which is in Westminster, near where he lives in Downing Street. He's in an NHS hospital and has been in intensive care with other people from around the UK. It is a very serious situation. Surely it's right to question the Prime Minister's health, the person who's leading us through all of this.
Oh, I don't disagree. Of course, it's important to check in, make sure that the current updates of the public are getting are consistent and accurate, and not just about him, but who is in essentially assuming command and who is making some of the major decisions in the meantime. And I'm not denying that the public shouldn't have an interest in his health. I just worry that it is going to be creating a narrative surrounding him, as we've seen quite a few papers and the whole clapping for Boris Johnson last night thing, or a few nights ago, that kind of overshadow the actual political and governmental response to this crisis and the limitations and, frankly, a huge amount of errors that his government and his board have made during this crisis. And I don't think those should be overshadowed by him getting the coronavirus himself. That's just my concern.
And we'll talk about the government's handling of all of this in a moment. Arthur, welcome. And what do you think about all of this? I mean, you're watching this from outside of the UK, so I'm not quite sure, you're not in the same sort of bubble that we're all in. But do you think we should be putting this focus on the Prime Minister's health?
I mean, like Noah said, he is the leader of the country. So people have a right to know what's going on in relation to his health. But to disproportionately portray that as opposed to how everyone else who's sick is having to deal with the situation is a misstep. And yeah, he is in an NHS hospital. So hopefully this will make him more sympathetic to the plight of NHS workers, because ultimately, while the people that are sick are going through an immense deal and they are fighting for their lives, the NHS workers are fighting for their lives as well, and everyone else's lives. Yeah.
And we're seeing NHS staff in intensive care themselves, and some sadly dying, and they really are on the front line of all of this, and they're feeling the effects of it more so than others. Neeraj, do you think we're focusing a little bit too much on the Prime Minister here?
I think I do think so. Yeah, I think like focusing on clapping for Boris. Like I do agree that we need to care about the Prime Minister. He is our leader. He's leading us through the crisis. But I think clapping for Boris, I'm worried that clapping for Boris is kind of has the possibility of overshadowing clapping for the NHS. Thousands of NHS healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, who are an important part of our response.
I mean, it's lovely, isn't it, when people come out at 8 p.m. on a Thursday and they do their clap for the NHS. So there was a bit of an idea on social media to get people to clap for Boris earlier in the week. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday to, make him feel better. But I certainly didn't see anyone clapping in my street. Just a few people putting the bins out. Enoch, your thoughts on this? Do you think we're focusing too much on the Prime Minister here?
I wouldn't say we're focusing too much on the Prime Minister. I would say the way we're focusing on him is becoming increasingly bizarre. I mean, you mentioned the whole clapping for Boris thing. That was spectacularly odd. I mean, clapping for the NHS works, I understand, but clapping for Boris is a weirdly partisan move. But then also, there's a whole dispute over whether or not it was right to refer to him as a fighter because he was, ill, and whether or not that was inappropriate or not, because obviously people who are ill, that sort of suggests people who die of coronavirus aren't fighting hard enough. And I thought that was a whole weird episode in the entire period.
Yeah, I mean, Emily Maitlis made that point on Newsnight, didn't she? That actually the idea of fighting isn't really fair on those that are suffering from this virus. Interesting to hear your thoughts on that. And I want to talk more widely now about the government's response to all of this and how they've been dealing with it here in the UK this week. Misha, you mentioned earlier there's been some failings that you think, or some errors at least, of the government's handling of all of this. What do you mean?
Well, for the first part, we have the fact that we knew this virus was coming for a long time. I mean, we've heard some reports of it breaking out in China and breaking out in other countries of Asia, and then spreading into Europe and the rest of the world in January and going into February. But quite not a lot of actual response was given by the government at that point. And then the fact that we had to wait until kind of late March to get this responsible quarantine, which a lot of countries were putting into effect a lot sooner. I mean, you see countries like Taiwan that did put these massive wide-scale testing and wide-scale lockdowns into effect, and now have managed to get away with far, far lower deaths than other countries. And then we have the point where they continue to accuse people for breaking these lockdown measures and not staying at home and not doing what you are regulated to do and aren't being asked to do. But at the same time, the actual advice and levels of response from the government have been quite mixed. They've been saying, oh, you can go out for an hour, but then you've also got the fact that you can go out for non-essential trips. And it's just been a bit of lacking of parity, is what I'm saying.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I suppose whatever any government would do here, there's going to be a barrage of criticism from the other side or from others, and any government is dealing with people's lives in this. 8,000 people have died nationally in the UK so far. Noah, I want to come to you next about the government's handling of all of this. Do you think they've been handling it responsibly, handling it well?
Well, I think the broad consensus is that they simply responded too slowly. I saw a news article today that said that in New Zealand, as soon as the first case of coronavirus was discovered, the country almost went into immediate lockdown. And so by going into lockdown so quickly, they managed to prevent the spread of cases and have almost managed to get away with hardly any at all, and that clearly hasn't been the case in the UK. What I'm interested in is sort of from a civil liberties perspective, in that I understand why we've had to go into this lockdown, but I do want us to try and get out of it as soon as possible. And so while it's inevitably going to go beyond these next 3 weeks, I think the government has to be looking towards their exit strategy. How are they going to get out of everyone's staying at home and getting back into normality. They can't assess the time frame of this, but it has to be something that they're considering. And I also do have I'm very lucky to have a garden. Lots of people don't have a garden, and so I think I've got lots of sympathy for people that are using public parks in London or around the country, but are maintaining that social distancing within parks. And I think people that are getting angry at members of the public for using parks aren't taking into account the difficulties of living in a tiny flat with no green space at all.
But we have seen some people that actually aren't respecting these rules, are going out sunbathing, or certainly where I live, having barbecues on the beach. It's not on, is it?
No, that isn't on. I think what it's all about is social distancing. I went to my local park and it was fine. There were people there, but the main thing is they're keeping their distance, so keeping that 2 metre rule. I'm trying to stick to the government's guidelines of doing exercise and going jogging, and in that I very much see the onus on me as keeping away from pedestrians and even going on the roads if there are people nearby. But I think we do need to have sympathy for people that are in these cramped, tiny spaces, and actually the real physical and mental implications of being in that confined space for a long time, especially as if you can't use a green space. And what we don't want is the response to coronavirus to be worse than the coronavirus itself.
I'm interested, Alvar, on your thoughts on this, because not only are you outside the UK, so you can look at our government's way of handling this from a different perspective, but I also want to know how things are being handled where you are.
So, I mean, like Misha said, the government's handling in the beginning was extremely lackadaisical. I mean, if the measures that are being implemented now had been implemented from day one, or even before they were implemented, in the sense of, oh, maybe we should start doing something, then the numbers coming out of the UK would be dramatically lower than they are today. As for how things are in Dubai, I mean, if they catch you on the road, you will be arrested. Even workers that work in key sectors, like medical workers, they need special permits to be able to use the roads. And medical workers, food delivery operators, they need permits to be on the road. And if you don't have a permit, then you will be arrested. So obviously the UAE government has a lot more power in terms of how it enacts these measures over the UK government. So when people say stuff like, oh, they should have closed down bars and restaurants from the beginning, to be fair to the government, they didn't have the legal power to do it up until recently. Whereas in the UAE, it's essentially a dictatorship. So whatever they say goes. But I mean,
do you think that's beneficial in this? Do you think that might actually be beneficial that they're able to implement these sorts of policies?
I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, having absolute power does make taking critical decisions like this more useful. Although I'm not entirely sure whether that's a trade-off we should be willing to accept.
Yeah, it's an interesting one when you put it all into the balance. Neeraj, do you think that here in the UK the government's been handling coronavirus well? Do you think their response has been good?
I agree with all the others who have spoken about this. That the government hasn't handled it very well at all, especially with the fact that it went with the discredited herd immunity theory, which would have been dreadful, and they didn't enact the lockdown early enough. What I also think is I think we should generally be wearing face masks as well in public, because, I mean, of course, we need to first make sure it goes to the NHS and the key workers. But I do think at some point the public should consider wearing face masks, because it has worked in places like South Korea, Taiwan, Japan. And that's exactly why China's been able to leave the lockdown. So I think that should be considered at some point.
I think part of the problem that some people perceive with the face masks is that they make people complacent, and then they end up touching their face and doing all sorts of things because they think that the face mask or the fresh air might make them immune. It's interesting you mentioned the herd immunity theory. It's something we haven't heard for a couple of weeks now. You think that was a mistake to perhaps follow that policy at the beginning of all of this?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it would have led to millions of needless deaths, and of course, none of the countries that are successful have have adopted the theory and put it into practice. So it's good that we've gone past that. But I think now we just need to focus on making sure people, that definitely the social distancing is working. But I think we should also think about stopping people from going for exercise as well, especially if you have your own garden. I think people should be staying at home. If they're exercising around the garden. I've seen like people doing marathons as well. Going around can be a bit of a headache, but I think if you have your garden, use it, and if you don't, I think you should feel free to use public parks, but only as like a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to stay in as much as possible. We're encouraging you to put your comments in today, and we've got one here from Sam who says face masks are mandated in most Asian countries now. It's something that we're having a lot of debate around face masks and whether they should be brought in and used a bit more within the UK. Thank you for your comment, Sam. And if you want to get in touch with your comment, just make sure you're putting it on the Johnny Jenkins post and not on a share or a group or any of that sort of stuff. Enoch, coming to you on all of this. I know you're probably not allowed too many opinions as head of news, but I want to know if you think the government's been dealing with all of this well.
I think when we're talking about the government's approach, I think there's been two key failures. Firstly, internal communication. The way we've seen police departments especially act is towards enforcing, blurring the line between what's guidance and what's actual law and trying to extend their own powers. I think that's been incredibly troubling. That's also affected how the public perceives what the government's doing. That's lowered public trust. But also, just in terms of what the government's been saying outwardly, starting with the herd immunity theory, which they explained horribly and then realized immediately they got wrong. And they managed to completely mess up the transition from that to full lockdown. And then ever since then, everything all the messaging has been completely confused. Even the end of the day press conferences haven't actually been the best. And I think those have been the two big issues for government. But also, on the point of New Zealand, I just want to say one thing. It's really hard to compare a country like New Zealand with a much smaller population, and especially in terms of air travel, which was the main way coronavirus traveled originally, significantly less air travel than it is for something like the UK.
Yeah, I mean, these country by country comparisons are certainly causing some problems. Now, there's been discussions this week about the government's outward facing and looking at it from that way. So you've got these press conferences that we get at 5 every day, and they've always been led by a man, a male minister, and then you have a couple of advisors or experts there who sometimes are women, but usually men. And the media rounds are generally being done by men. And Enoch, I want to know your thoughts on that. For example, why haven't we seen
made up of men as well?
Yeah, I'm aware of that, Misha, and I'm not going to dwell on this too much. But Enoch, we haven't seen the Home Secretary very much, have we?
No, Priti Patel has basically vanished, which to me indicates one thing, essentially that the government considers her such a liability, even Dominic Raab is trusted over her to communicate with the public, which would have been astonishing just a few months ago. But she's really, with the issues of immigration, sort of eroded her trust amongst the public. That now, at a time when the government needs to emphasize, immigration, especially for the NHS, they really don't want her around, and that's astonishing.
Yeah, for someone in charge of policing and law and order, and a lot of this comes down to policing, we haven't been seeing very much of her. You're watching the Johnny Jenkins Show here on Facebook Live. Thank you for your company this afternoon. And if you want to get in touch with your comments this afternoon, then just drop your comment down below. Now, we've spoken about the coronavirus, and I'm sure it's something we'll return to a little bit later on in the show. But something which we heard about last Saturday was the new Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He was widely expected to become the Labour Party leader. He did. He won that contest against Lisa Nandy and Rebecca Long-Bailey. He's been appointing his shadow cabinet this week, and both Nandy and Long-Bailey having positions in there, as his former leader of Labour, Ed Miliband, also getting a position. We'll talk about the shadow cabinet in a moment if you want to, but let's first come to you, Misha. Do you think that Keir Starmer was the right person to win the Labour leadership election?
I think it was inherently quite clear that he was the front runner for a long time. as was pretty much evidenced from the huge amount of trade union support that he got during this whole candidacy. And so I think a lot of people have kind of mentally adjusted to it, which is a bit of a difficult process in the form of democracy, but that's what you have. I don't think he's the return to a huge amount of like Labour centrism that was previously characterized by huge amounts of people on the left. I mean, the sort of Labour left, which is considerable. But and I think he does have a good track record of his work as a human rights lawyer and his stances on several key Labour manifesto positions. And I think he is slightly less radical than someone like Jeremy Corbyn has been, which hopefully will be able to be appealing to people who are worried about such the massive steps in contrast to our current governmental system and our current liberal system, to be honest. And so I think there is a good chance he'll be able to pull in people like that. My worry is mostly in terms of aesthetics, that for all his good policies, he kind of doesn't have really the charisma or the character of either Jeremy Corbyn or really Boris Johnson. Like, watching him speak is a lot less memorable and leaves a lot less of an impact, which, whilst you wouldn't want it to be a massive factor, unfortunately is in our current way of dealing with and taking in news. So hopefully it's time to work on that. But in any case, I very much don't envy his position of becoming the leader of the opposition in such a time of difficult crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for whoever was going to win that to now be working with the government or not working with them, or, you know, just coming in this very difficult time. Misha, will you miss Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader?
I mean, you ask everyone in Britain, you'll get completely different answers. Personally, I liked a lot of what he stood for in terms of points. I liked how he managed to get a lot more people interested, especially young people interested in politics, and try and really managed to create quite a large and quite enthusiastic base of supporters. I think in terms of some of his policies, he wasn't as clear. I think he did have a tendency to try and not really address some of the major criticisms that were put towards the Labour Party during his tenure, particularly around anti-Semitism, which has become a massive factor. And I had know people who have been completely put off from voting for Labour in 2019 as a result of that decision, so I can completely understand that. So whilst I never really entered this full cult of personality, I will miss some of the energy and some of the points he has brought to the Labour Party, and I will be grateful for bringing a lot more serious points such as the criticism of austerity and issues surrounding more universal basic healthcare and that. Ultimately, I think he has done good, but ultimately that is only on an ideological and not essentially practical level.
Sure. Okay. Now, a couple of questions to you then. First of all, do you miss Jeremy Corbyn? Will you miss Jeremy Corbyn? And then also, what do you think of Keir Starmer?
And I won't miss Jeremy Corbyn at all. I did write an article recently for Perspectives that was quite damning of his leadership. No, I don't think whether it was as a leader, he failed, as Misha said, on anti-Semitism. He failed to unite his party electorally, who's been a complete disaster for Labour, giving them the worst results since 1935. And even in terms of policies, lots of his policies, he's often criticised for being too radical. I'd say Jeremy Corbyn wasn't radical enough. Lots of his answers, particularly in the 2019 election campaign, were simply to have more spending without looking at where the money was going and what the internal structures of, say, the healthcare system or the education system. So I won't miss him. As for Keir Starmer, I supported Lisa Nandy and the Labour leadership. I thought she'd been more effective at connecting with the areas that Labour lost in 2019. But I would have had Keir Starmer as my second choice if I'd been a member of Labour. I think it's sort of too early to tell how he's performing so far. He's clearly brought in a broad range of people into his shadow cabinet, which we might talk about later. But as a leader, I struggle to see whether he's able to win back those northern areas that voted against Labour. And one of the reasons they voted against Labour was because of Labour's damning Brexit policy, which Keir Starmer helped to construct. So I think maybe the odds we're looking into the future, into the 2024 election, I think the odds are that Keir Starmer doesn't become Prime Minister. But if he does, it won't be because of his successes. It will be because of the government's failure, perhaps over coronavirus.
You're not putting a lot of faith into Keir Starmer now, huh?
No, I'm not, I'm afraid. Just so far, as I say, it's too early to tell, but so far, I just think with that second referendum policy that he had, I really, I admire his stuff on human rights, big fan of all that stuff, but I think in terms of his policies, I struggle to see so far whether he'll be able to win back those people that Labour so desperately need.
Yeah, I think that Brexit policy might come back to haunt him at some point if it hasn't already. Neeraj, are you pleased that Keir Starmer's now the leader of the opposition?
I mean, it's sort of. I think it's good that we've got a moderate leader of the Labour Party after Jeremy Corbyn, who was definitely very radical, and I think too radical, too much spending, and I think that's probably, again, along with Brexit, kind of contributed to Labour's downfall in the 2019 election. I feel the problem with Keir Starmer is that he doesn't have any enough charisma. So people were not very happy about Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister because they didn't think he had enough good leadership skills. But I feel Keir Starmer doesn't seem to energize me. I feel kind of bored when I hear him speak. It's a bit sad, but I think he's definitely got a good shadow cabinet. He's definitely uniting the party, and he's taken some good first steps dealing with the anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party.
Yeah, it's interesting that he put that front and center when he made his acceptance video. He said he'll judge his success when it comes to anti-Semitism on the number of Jewish members who'd be returning to the party. It's quite a difficult thing to tackle, isn't it? Especially when some would argue it's so sort of institutionally a part of Labour. So hopefully he'll be able to do something about that. Enoch, we're running a poll on Twitter at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We are running a poll on whether or not you think Keir Starmer's doing a good job so far. And currently, it's not looking good for Keir. It's 60% no. That's the current answer. But I think it is fair to say he's doing a very difficult job in a very difficult time. And in my opinion, as far as I'm allowed to have an opinion, in the past week, he's already made more effort to sort of bring Labour back in contact with the Jewish community. I think Jeremy Corbyn made his entire time as leader. I think it's going to only going in good ways, I think.
Yeah, I mean, some said that actually within 4 days, Keir Starmer had done more when it came to anti-Semitism than Corbyn did in his 4 years.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely fair statement. Not just because, as we saw online, anti-Semites felt less comfortable being in the party and have chosen to leave on their own under this new leadership. But if you look at his shadow cabinet, the only two leadership candidates who were not in it, Richard Burgoyne and Dawn Butler, were only two people to not agree to the Board of Deputies agreement about anti-Semitism during the leadership campaign, which means he's stuck to that pledge of saying those people not be represented in Labour Party leadership. And he's made great effort to reconnect with the Jewish community. I think there's all just good signs. Yeah,
you mentioned the shadow cabinet. Sorry, so that's something I certainly want to talk about because it's. Well, when you get a new leader, they have this duty, this job of putting together a task force that will be at the top of the party that will unite behind the leader, but also perhaps will represent the broad church that the party is. We're seeing in that shadow cabinet former leader Ed Miliband, who remains an MP, I think, for Doncaster North, if my memory serves me correct. And then you've got Rebecca, Noah's nodding, Noah's the expert on this. And then you've got Rebecca Long-Bailey and Lisa Nandy, who he was up against in that leadership campaign. They've both got top jobs in the shadow cabinet. Now we're coming to you on this. Do you think he's done a good job putting together this shadow cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite critical of Keir Starmer, but I think he has done a good job so far surrounding his shadow cabinet. I'm pleased that he's got a broad range of the Labour Party in there. So you have got people that would be on the more Corbynite wing of the party, like Rebecca Long-Bailey and Andy MacDonald, as well as people in his shadow cabinet team like Liz Kendall, Pat McFadden and Alison McGovern, who you consider to be on the more Blairite wing of the party. So he has got a broad cross-section. And I think particularly if he wants to keep those people that were in momentum or that were energised by Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party, having members of his shadow cabinet that were in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet is an important way to do that. I think where Labour struggles so far is it's tricky for them to come up with policy formulation, not least because we have 4 years until the next election, but because all the political attention is on the coronavirus. So you've had the BBC cancel key sort of non-essential political programmes so that they can focus their programming on how to respond to the coronavirus. And so that means new Labour spokespeople haven't had the opportunity to deliver their new policies and ideas. But in terms of competent individuals, I was pleased to see Annalise Dodds become Shadow Chancellor. I thought she'd always been a very effective spokesperson under Jeremy Corbyn. And generally, I think so far, obviously there could be resignations, there could be people making errors, but so far I think he's done a good job with his shadow cabinet team.
And putting both of the people that he stood against, Lisa Nandy and Rebecca Long-Bailey, into that shadow cabinet. Lisa Nandy is Foreign Secretary, some saying that's a bit of a funny choice, but Rebecca Long-Bailey is Education Secretary. Do you think he's put these two quite close to him? Keep your enemies close, and keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Yeah, that's it.
That could be the idea behind it. Yeah, I think he's trying to be conciliatory as well. I mean, he did win with 56% of the vote, but that was still 44% that didn't vote for him. So I think he's probably recognised that those two opponents were effective enough, along with Emily Thornberry and Jess Phillips, who dropped out, and Emily Thornberry, who was eliminated. They've both got a place in his shadow cabinet team. So I think it shows again how he's trying to keep a broad cross section of the parliamentary party, but really a large percentage of the Labour parliamentary party will be in the shadow cabinet, because when you think they have just over 200 MPs, there are lots of shadow cabinet roles. So he's got a broad range of people in, as you say, including Ed Miliband, which I do think that's a slightly questionable choice. But apart from that, I think he's done really well. But so far can only really be focusing on how to deal what his opposition and response can be to the coronavirus.
Why is Ed Miliband questionable?
Well, I just think he lost the election for Labour in 2015, and many would blame Ed Miliband for leading to the election of Jeremy Corbyn, because he changed the way that Labour leadership rules work. So it allowed supporters of Labour to sign up to vote in leadership elections. So they just had to pay £3, and that led to lots of influx of new members, many of whom may have had their hearts in the right place, but ultimately led to the election of Jeremy Corbyn, who had the worst result for Labour in over 80 years.
Interesting. I want to come to you. Who should we go to? Let's go to Misha. What do you think of all of this? Do you think actually having a top team that has different wings of the party and a bit of a mix of things might help to unite Labour?
Well, one of the biggest campaign pledges that Keir Starmer ran on was uniting the party and creating a space that wasn't so much built around factionalism. I think that is a key and legitimate criticism of Corbyn. It did very much divide the Labour Party into like far left or centre. But so ultimately, I think that's a good idea, especially having political rivals of Rebecca Long-Bailey and Lisa Nandy, so that their supporters do still feel represented and feel like they can still have their voices heard. So I do agree with him on that choice, and I do hope that he is able to unite the party, and so it doesn't create so much infighting, which tends to have dominated narrative around Labour for a long time. And if they can band together and become more of an amicable opposition government, then I think we'll see a lot more positive results.
Enoch, what do you think about some of these shadow cabinet appointments? Do you think there's a good mix in there?
I think this is a really, really interesting shadow cabinet team. I think it's interesting that we're now basically on the sort of the first generation of Labour shadow cabinets where there's really very minimal, and not really anyone here was in a government before. This is a sort of an all new intake. I think the choices of the lots of soft left individuals to surround him in his core team is quite interesting. Annalise Dodds, I think, is a particularly great choice for the Shadow Chancellor. Although I did do a very embarrassing tweet about this when it happened. I said, Annalise Dodds, the best politician we have in ages, because she hasn't tweeted before. But it turns out her Twitter account had just been broken temporarily and all the tweets were hidden. But they also showed up again a second later, so I was embarrassed. But also, I think the choice of Lisa Nandy as Foreign Secretary, that's the most interesting choice, because it sort of signals that he wants to embrace her ideas without necessarily putting her in a role that's going to best allow her to enact policy that sort of promotes her to the front of the Labour table. Yeah,
it's an interesting one, replacing Emily Thornberry in that position. And I think our advice to any wannabe MP is probably delete all of your tweets. That would probably be a good place to start. You're watching the Johnny Jenkins Show here on Facebook. Thank you for your company this afternoon as we approach 3:45. I want to move on to a different topic now and talk about the US presidential election, and particularly the news that Bernie Sanders has suspended his campaign. That's term for pulling out the competition, essentially, which means that we've got Joe Biden, who was the vice president under Barack Obama, versus Donald Trump. I mean, that's sort of pretty clear now. I want to hear your thoughts on Bernie Sanders pulling out. Arfavar, what do you think about this?
I'm extremely sad about Bernie dropping out. I'm a hardcore Bernie bro. You know, I mean, now you've just got some guy who's really old and declining mental faculties, who's weird with women, running against Donald Trump, which is never a good thing, because, you know, they tried that in 2016 when they put Hillary against Trump, an establishment Democrat who worked very closely under Obama, and it didn't work. And the Democratic Party's assumption that trying the same thing will work at this time is just ridiculous. I think you'll find a lot of people who were very excited to vote for Bernie will now either A, not be voting, or B, might swing around and vote for Trump, because there are a lot of people who still feel that Trump offers a solution to their problems, although Bernie's solutions would be better. And Biden doesn't really seem to be appealing to those people at the moment. And Bernie himself has said that Biden will need to move further left to kind of pull these people in.
You think that the Democrats might have thrown away any chance they originally had?
Yeah, unless Biden can make some changes to his policy decisions fast, they've pretty much just secured Trump another term.
Fascinating. What's your thoughts on this, Misha, on Bernie Sanders pulling out of the race? Are you disappointed?
I am. I obviously can't vote in the US election, but I have been hoping that Bernie Sanders would have been the strongest possible chance to combat Donald Trump in this second election. I mean, for me, the biggest factor is that Joe Biden is very much a return to the sort of Obama-era politics, which is what a lot of, as previously pointed out, a lot of voters turned against. And now you had someone that worked with Obama strongly, Hillary Clinton being defeated by quite a wide margin. But now you've got literally the vice president that Donald Trump can turn all they did this thing about during the Obama years, and this has resulted in something bad that he probably will also be responsible for. And have that control the narrative. When ultimately Joe Biden feels like he's running on a platform of I can defeat Donald Trump, but isn't offering anything really beyond that in terms of what's this new path we're going to go forward? How are we going to get so much good done now? How are we going to combat the problems that the Trump administration has largely been ignoring, such as climate change and major human rights violations? And I think that that's something that Bernie Sanders had a lot more of an advantage of. It was a clearer path and a lot more stronger narrative of this is what I'm going to do, and this is why it's right to do it. And I think Joe Biden is lacking that, and I don't strongly believe that he actually will beat Donald Trump because he isn't offering anything substantially new beyond that.
Because we saw the them versus us thing when it was Hillary who played a part in the Obama administration versus Trump, and I mean it's just going to take that to the extremes now, having the old vice president against the current president, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the one change that Trump had, for me, one of the major narrative changes that he has lost since his first election is that he is no longer an outsider. Before, there was this idea of we need someone who isn't part of this, elitist, even though, he's a major elite in pretty much every definition, but someone who wasn't already a political figure to come in and fix the system. And he hasn't done that, but he's now no longer an outsider. He's literally been at the top of the political system. So he's lost that. But what he's gained is a lot more counter narratives to use against the Democrats for all the different things he can talk about, how they've been up to the end and really not allowing him to do all the things he wanted to do. And as a result, I think a lot of that will be turned into the narrative of the 2020 election. And even though there is a lot that can be used against him, I think the media will be more focused on both the criticism of Democrats during this previous election cycle and the previous Obama administration, and that will become a lot more of the conversation in politics. I think I'm fairly certain that being the case.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to see Bernie Sanders up against Donald Trump, because you'd have had that outside of things working from both the Democrat and the Republican side. Noah, what do you think about all of this?
I suppose I was more surprised rather than disappointed that Bernie Sanders eventually pulled out of the Democrat race, because the narrative had been for so long that he was doing really well. Certainly in the early states that had their primaries like Iowa and New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders was performing extremely well, whereas I remember in one, Joe Biden came in 5th place. But that may have been because those early states were more representative of Bernie's home state of Vermont, whereas by the time you got to Super Tuesday and states like South Carolina, Joe Biden was performing far more effectively. I think many of the people that were in the Democrat race realized that they just believed that Bernie Sanders couldn't win, and so they thought the best thing for them to do would be to withdraw, suspend their campaigns, and try and unite behind this figure of Joe Biden. I still don't think Joe Biden will win. Having said that, though, there's been lots of criticism of the Obama years. That was an electorally successful platform. They won the US election in 2008 and 2012, so it's proven that can resonate with American voters. However, I think I've always thought that Donald Trump will get a second term. However, I think if Joe Biden does win, it won't be because of his own, it'll be like Keir Starmer, it won't be because of his own virtues and successes, but it will be because of the complete failure of the Trump government responding to coronavirus.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Neeraj, were you surprised, disappointed, happy when Bernie Sanders pulled out?
I wasn't really surprised, actually, because Bernie Sanders had been losing many of the presidential primaries after the early ones. But I think, yeah, it's a bit sad that Bernie's out. I definitely felt he could have given America a breath of fresh air. Medicare for all was one of the policies I was most impressed by. That could have changed the healthcare system to something like the NHS, which a lot of Americans have been looking for. And I'm also, I just don't feel Biden can connect with a lot of the voters who have voted for Trump as well.
Do you think Sanders would have been able to beat Trump had he been the Democratic nominee?
I think he had a chance because very much Sanders is an outsider, and so just like Trump, he's got that same sort of advantage. I think he might have had a chance. He got quite a movement, built up quite a movement with young people, and I think he could have engaged more of them to vote, even those who didn't vote. Maybe in 2016, some of those voters could have voted now, and that could have really changed America.
We've already heard from one Bernie bro this afternoon. I wonder if our resident Bernie bro thinks that Biden has any chance up against Trump.
Not at all. Biden doesn't speak to the issues that Bernie spoke to and that Trump tries to speak to in his own backward manner. Some people would rather see the entire system burn down than have things stay the same, and I think that's why a lot of people will end up voting for Trump. But yeah, I think though to be kind of optimistic, it is only a matter of time before someone like Bernie becomes the nominee, because he was more successful this year than he was in 2016, and as sort of the younger generation matures and more of the voter bloc demographic changes to skew younger, you'll start seeing more of these progressive ideals be put on the forefront, and the Democratic Party will have to change, otherwise they risk becoming obsolete.
Enoch, a matter of time before we get a Bernie-esque candidate as president.
I do think it's a matter of time, but probably quite a long time. I think something that Bernie sort of revealed to me this time, actually something that made me sort of optimistic about Biden's chances against Trump, is that lots of the votes he had in 2016 were more anti-Hillary votes than they were pro-Bernie votes, especially in the Midwest, based in like Michigan, which he lost this time despite having a very similar progressive platform. I think it's really tempting to look back at sort of reframe the 2016 election in your mind as a great Trump victory, when in reality, Trump lost a popular vote, and Hillary lost by a very slim margin of votes in several states where she couldn't encourage people to turn out because she was simply that unpopular. Joe Biden doesn't have those weaknesses. I think Trump is going to be particularly unpopular going into this election after the coronavirus, especially if the economy does not pick up. And something we've sort of seen again and again is that Biden is far more popular with Democrats than Hillary Clinton was. And I think I wasn't really surprised when Bernie dropped out, because from the very beginning, his sort of 30% strategy, where he thought all he needed was 30% of votes in each state to win, it fell apart when candidates dropped out. And it proved it wasn't going to work once he placed like South Carolina, once he couldn't get that number of votes. So I think Biden stands a decent chance, actually. I'm going to go against the panel today.
Some people look at Joe Biden and just say, actually, he's just a bit weird. He just doesn't look like a president.
Oh, I fully think he's weird. I think it's a disaster he's won, if I'm allowed to say that. But I also think once he gets up on stage, something that lots of people have been sort of down talking, Joe Biden's, he's declining mental faculties. But as we saw once he got on stage with Bernie Sanders, that those sort of when we undercut expectations, he performs better. Something that's similar happened to Donald Trump. So I think if we keep doing that going into the election, he's going to look even better figure against Donald Trump, who is again particularly unpopular this year.
I'm also interested in and we've only got a few minutes, but I'm interested in the effects of all of this on coronavirus on Trump's election later this year, because some people said actually, the economy is good, that's all okay, employment's doing okay, he's quite popular, but actually he's widely seen as messing up the coronavirus pandemic in America, and there's plenty of cases there and deaths as well. So I wonder if that might affect his chances in all of this. Enoch, I'll come to you first.
Absolutely. I think normally you would see a rally around the flag effect for a president under crisis, but Trump has really noticeably lacked that. People have really been critical of his handling of the situation. Not helped by that is that he's just terribly in press conferences, and even his own supporters at points, especially in people like Fox News, have gone, actually, this is a very weird situation. I don't know why he's handling it this way. Trump was unpopular with a massive booming economy. I can't imagine how unpopular he's going to be in an economic collapse, essentially.
What do you think about all of this, Afavar? Do you think that actually the coronavirus pandemic might have negatively affected Trump's chances?
Definitely. I think that his handling has been a complete disaster, and a lot of people are recognizing that. But also, I'm not sure that's necessarily enough for him to go down in the upcoming election, because Trump did very well with the electoral college system and the way he was able to kind of rig the system in his favor. And I think we'll see a similar story this time around, especially because Trump is ridiculously popular with his base. And even though his base is becoming smaller and smaller, the enthusiasm you see from those people is only growing stronger. And I think it's not impossible for Biden to win, but I do think that ultimately it's not going to go that way.
Okay, Noah, in these last 2 minutes, I just want to come to you and ask actually if you think coronavirus is going to affect Trump's chances of getting a second term.
I think coronavirus could be the one ray of light for Joe Biden. I've seen these shocking statistics on Twitter that have shown tens of millions of people, tens of millions of Americans now claiming unemployment benefit. Apparently it's 1 in 10 of the American workforce have been laid off work. And in America, there's far more of a stigma about claiming employment benefits from the government than there is in the UK. So that just shows the economic situation and the catastrophe that previously wasn't there for Trump. It was an advisor to Bill Clinton that once said all elections are about the economy, stupid, and that could be the one thing that does damage Trump's re-election chances and potentially, who knows, usher in a Joe Biden presidency. But that's why I think all Bernie Sanders supporters have a duty to vote for Joe Biden, because even though they can't get 100% of what they want with Joe Biden, it's better to get 70% of that. 100% of what they want with Bernie Sanders, it's better to get 70% of that with Joe Biden.
Fascinating stuff. Well, panel, thank you for being on the show this afternoon. It's been great to have you all. Has anyone got any big isolation plans for Easter?
Well, actually, on the World One Talk of America, Raw News is going to launch a new America-focused podcast very soon. So everyone join the Raw News group if you want to hear more about that and get involved.
Oh, Enoch can never resist a cheeky plug. Oh, Enoch, whilst we're here, how's that poll looking for Keir Starmer on Twitter?
Well, it did swing around for him a bit. Keir Starmer started looking. Yeah, Keir Starmer is now 50% job approval. So congratulations, Keir Starmer. The people of Raw News like you. Well done.
Oh, you can take part in the poll by heading to Raw News Warwick if you're live with us this afternoon. Well, panel, thank you for coming on. Have a lovely Easter if you're celebrating, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
The Johnny Jenkins Show here on Facebook Live and all the other places that it goes out. So thank you, and stay well, and we'll speak to you very soon.